So the government always works for the people, of the people and by the people. So there are different types of budgets that have been formed in our country. Free riders are one where the government is not going to charge you any money, expenses that the government is going to make towards the nation. All those factors will be indirect taxes. Now when I say indirect tax, government budget, meaning and its component. Good morning and welcome to the first session of Chapter 11, Government Budget and Economy. This is a very interesting chapter for all of us. Why? Because we are now going to understand on a national basis how does a budget exactly happens. So government budget, when I speak about itself, it's quite interesting. Why? Because there are a lot of components, and based on those components only, the economy of the nation is determined. So just quickly getting into the topics that we are going to see today. Introduction, government budget, objectives of the budget, provisions versus the production. We are going to talk about the redistribution of function of the government, stabilization function of the government, and the classification of budget. So quite a bit of things to look into it. All of them are very simple, interesting, educative and informative. So you just need to pay a little bit of attention and start learning into the concepts in the most wide and appreciable manner altogether. So let's start here. Introduction, government budget, meaning and its component. For any government in our country, the biggest challenge is that they need to frame a set of work through which they can reach the public. Now, budget is actually a set of activities which are being designed in order to meet the needs and wants of the country. So there are different types of budgets that have been formed in our country, but primarily what we look into it is the financial budget that is being drawn on February of every month, of every year altogether. So that's why it is very, very important to pay attention to the government budget. Now there are many objectives of government budget. One of the most prominent objective is to meet the financial requirements, to bring in stabilization, to start understanding what exactly various sectors are lagging and how we need to fit in terms of the growth function altogether. Now if you look in here, now for example, in the national budget of India will always try to address some of the core sectors like railways, defense, agriculture, manufacturing, services and different predominant sectors which try to help in the growth and development of the country. So it is very, very important to understand each and every component of the budget and start moving forward. Now, many a times the government will try to set a budget so that they are able to address the nation and its issues altogether. But then there are times when we fall short of the budget, or there are times when we are not able to address the budget altogether. So in the coming slides, we will try to understand exactly how this budget forms a very important component in terms of growth in the national economy. So moving forward, the government budget. The government budget relates to the receipts and expenditure of the government for a particular year. The impact will be there in subsequent years. So today the government has decided that they are going to frame a budget for this current year, that is 2021, and they will try to understand what are the receipts and expenditure. This word is very, very important for all of us to understand. Receipts meaning the income that the government is going to get, expenditure meaning the expenses that the government is going to make towards the nation. So that is why receipts and expenditure form the most important part of the budget. Now what is that important part altogether? Now when you start seeing in the financial year is that there will be an impact in the subsequent years. So when you talk about the receipts and expenditure, whatever happens in the current year, there will be an impact in the subsequent years also. So there will be some sort of changes that will be coming into the national budget. Now the revenue budget is the current financial year. So this is very, very important when we talk about the revenue budget, which means what is the factor, what are the earning members for us, where is the country making money altogether. Then we have the capital budget, where we are going to talk about the assets and liabilities. Now in a country like India, for example, we have seen that there are many sectors that require a lot of financial inclusion or an infusion of funds altogether. Now for example, let us take with the current scenario, there has been a lot of loss, there has been a dip in the production. The banks and financial institutions have suffered a lot in terms of the current pandemic. So what happens to the government of India is that they need to include a lot of money into the system so that at any given point of time the economy is not impacted. So that is where you would see the capital budget coming into picture. The government needs to infuse capital into several sectors in order to bring a recovery into the economic altogether. So that is where the capital budget will make a lot of importance in terms of the economy. Now there is also a scenario where you need to see that the capital budget is not just going to talk about only the expenses, it's also going to talk about an asset factor. So today, if the government of India through the Atmanirbhar plan decides to invest money on infrastructure, on education, on technology, on defense, on any of the predominant sectors, those sectors will be considered an asset for us in the long run. So when you look into this, capital budget is a very, very predominant factor where you have to understand what are all the crucial sectors of importance for growth altogether. Now, moving forward, we are going to talk about the objectives of budget. The first objective, allocation function of government budget. Now, the government will try to select certain sectors and will try to put in money there. It is not mandatory for the government to keep on putting money in equal terms and ratios in all the sectors. So the government will decide. If the railways has to be given importance, defense has to be given importance, manufacturing has to be given importance, or services have to be given importance. So what we try to do here is that we try to allocate funds depending on the need, depending on the situation. So that is the most important function of the government. Second, government will provide certain goods and services which cannot be provided by market mechanism. Now, for example, the citizens will always depend on the government for certain benefits. It might be a healthcare plan, it might be a ration card, it might be a public park, or it might be an area where it is some beneficial for the elderly citizens altogether. So the government will try to provide certain factors for the public which cannot be done through a business or a trade. So those are the sectors or those are the domains where the budget will allocate itself, saying that this is what we need to give for the people. So that is why it is very, very important that we identify those sectors. Now, for example, pension is something which is not given in private companies, but for the government employees, pension is being given. For the government employees, there are some ESI healthcare benefits. Now, these are certain things which the government has planned itself as a part of the working conditions itself. So the elderly people or the people who have retired from there will get some sort of benefits. These are benefits which are not given by private companies, which are not given by any exchange system, or which are not given by any trade mechanisms. These are something which are inbuilt in the system so that the citizens, the workers, the employees are getting benefited in the long run. So government will try to allocate and provide certain mechanisms to them. Now you have public goods, transport, parks, or you see railways, any of the things which are being wholly owned by the government, we call them as public goods. Public goods are meant for every person in this country to use and make the maximum benefit out of it. Next, we have the private goods, which are manufactured by individual institutions and organizations. So when I say a private good, that means that it is being manufactured by a company. Let's say Tata Motors, Hyundai company, Maruti. These are all private goods. Why? Because they are manufactured by a particular group of company or an organization. But when you look at public transports, when you look at company like ITDC, Indian Tourism Development Corporation, all these are all public factors where everybody and anybody can be a part of that system. Then we have free riders. Free riders are one where the government is not going to charge you any money for utilizing that specific service or any objective. Now, for example, we have parks for the children to play. Now, these parks have been built by the local government, keeping in mind the citizens of that native place. So what they want is that they want the children, they want the elderly people, they want the parents to spend some of their leisure time there. These are all free riders. We do not charge for that. So anybody can come to the park, can sit, can play and can enjoy the benefits of the government property that has been established there. That is what we meant by free riders altogether. So these are the objectives of the government budget, what we try to do at a national level. Moving forward, now we are going to talk about public provision and the public production altogether. Now these are two different words, provision and production. Provision means that they are going to be financed through some means. That is the word that we need to understand, which means that through some means, provision itself, there is some mean, there is some method, there is some ideology through which I can reach you. So that is why public provision means that they are financed through the budget and can be used without any direct payment, which means directly the government will not need to intervene there. They will allocate the budget there, they will provide it automatically through some means, through some channels through which it can be utilized for the public purpose. Now public production, that means this is the goods that are produced by the government or the private sector also, but for whom? But for the public, for the benefit of the public. When the goods are directly produced by the government, we call it as public production. So now I would like to take the example of Indian Railways. Indian Railways is a direct production by the central government of India. Indian Railways is wholly owned by government of India. So the railways which is run by the government is for the people, of the people and by the people. That is a public production. That's a public transport. So every citizen of this country is eligible to use that particular service. So that is what we mean by public production. The production which is done by the government for the sake of people directly, without bringing in any sort of vendors, without bringing in any private players there. That is called as your public production altogether. Now moving forward, now we are going to see that the distribution function of the government budget. The distribution function, how does it happen? Now when I say the redistribution altogether, government wants to give money back to the people, not just because they are the citizens of the country. That's because the government wants to understand that the money circulation has to happen over a period of time. So the government sector affects the personal disposable income in the form of collecting tax. Now today, if you are an earning member, you have to pay a certain amount of money as tax to the government. So the government will collect revenue from the people at any given point of time. Now what happens with these taxes? After collecting the tax, the government will use that money and start building infrastructure, roadways, railways, whatever possible for the benefit of the people. So the money that is collected from the people is again rotated back towards the people for their own benefit. So that is how the money is again distributed back to the citizens in the form of facilities or benefits. That is what we call it as the redistribution redistribution function. So the income collected from the people will go back to the people in the form of facilities and benefit. Why is that important? Because we want it to be fair by the society. The government considers it that there should be a fair distribution of income. There should be a fair distribution of money among the society. So whatever money that is collected from the public should go back to them in the form of benefits, in the form of facilities, in the form of some sort of good, so that the society is not affected. So the government always works for the people, of the people, and by the people. That is what is very, very important that we need to understand in terms of redistribution function altogether. So at any given point of time, please do not worry about this factor. What happened to the money which I paid as taxes? The money which you have paid as tax will again come back to you in the form of some benefit, in the form of some facilities that have been created by the government. So that is why we say that it is very, very important that we pay the taxes regularly. Then only the government will be able to function properly, and they will be able to create better facilities for the citizen of the country. Going forward, we are also going to talk about stabilization function altogether. What is a stabilization function? The government may need some corrections in terms of fluctuations in income and employment. Now this is a very, very important point that comes in terms of our country. Now in India, the biggest question is not about employment, but it is about the stability of employment. Many organizations do not have a proper channel through which they can stabilize the employment factor altogether. So there are several unorganized sectors in India which do not guarantee employment to its members, to its workers. So automatically what happens? There will be a shift in balance. Certain sectors will get highly paid, highly recognized, and there are certain sectors which do not get any benefit at all. So the government comes in as a correction function there and tries to stabilize the economy by bringing back the fluctuations to a normal stand as far as possible. So that is why the stabilization function of government is to act like a monitor and bring back the equilibrium in position, so that at any given point of time there will not be any disturbances happening in the economy. Now the overall level of the employment and prices depends upon the level of aggregate demand. Suppose a country has all its citizens fully employed. That means every citizen in that country will be earning an income. That means every citizen will have the power to purchase something, spend something, and also make a savings. So income and employment are so closely related that they lead to the most important factor called as aggregate demand. So that is very, very important. Government's ideology is that moment they create fuller employment to the country, automatically the aggregate demand will go up through consumption. So the government will act as an important economic agent trying to create more and more employment so that everybody can be a part of this cycle altogether. Now at any point of time, if the consumption level starts coming down, then automatically the aggregate demand will also fall down. So it is mandatory for the government in order to create employment and boost the economy to the next level as far as possible. The third factor, the intervention of government, is to expand demand and reduce its constant. That is where I am trying to understand and make you go on the flow, that the intervention, government is not trying to obstruct anybody. Government's job is not to block or give access. Government's job is to just stand as a neutral person, understand the fluctuations. So the government will try to provide a bridge. It will connect the gaps so that everybody in the economy will get the maximum benefit altogether. So that is the job of the government, to provide benefit to all. moving forward, we are now going to talk about the classification of receipts. That is going to be revenue receipts. What is revenue receipts? Are those receipts that do not lead to a claim on the government, which means government is just getting income from it. Government is not owning it. It is a money that is being paid to the government. So government is getting money from revenue receipts. They are divided into two factors. One is called as the tax, other one is called as the non-tax. Tax revenues are important because they are the direct revenue for the government. That is how government is going to make money. It can be a personal tax, it can be corporate tax, it can be indirect. Whatever kind of taxes that we are going to collect are going to be the direct revenue for the government altogether. Then we have the indirect taxes like excise duty or the goods produce, custom duties. All those factors will be indirect taxes. Now when I say indirect taxes, they are not directly levied on the consumer. It is going to be collected from the consumer indirectly through these formats. So moment when we import goods, moment when we buy something from outside, a tax will be formed as a part of it. That is the reason our Prime Minister had told long time back, make in India, because when we make in India, we can avoid the import taxes and duties altogether. That is where India will get benefited. The citizens do not have to pay extra money for all those goods which they are going to import, because we have our own resources, we have our own capabilities, strengths. We can develop the best product that is available in our own country. So going forward, revenue receipts is being divided into taxable and non-taxable revenues. Revenue receipts itself means the money that is being collected by the government. Tax revenues are direct source of income. Non-taxable revenues are the ones which are not directly put on the public, but it is going to be collected in different forms and format from the people. Now going forward, we come to the conclusion of the first session on government budget and economy. I hope and believe that this session was interesting and informative for you. In the coming sessions, we are going to see the different kinds of budgets, the motives, and the different factors that are governing it. Until then, goodbye and good luck from my side. Stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay educative forever. Thank you once again for joining me today.